Welcome to Soul Night Live, episode number 117. Today, our guest is Richard Williams from Kansas. Hey, Rich, how's it going?
Hey, everybody. Doing great.
Good to see you. Well, thanks for taking time out of your busy day today. I hear you're in Wisconsin tonight, or right now, getting ready for a
Yeah.
show. Is that right?
Yeah. Tonight we're in Wausau, and tomorrow night we're in Milwaukee.
Okay. And I think Kansas City's right around the corner, too. Is that right?
That's next weekend. Yeah. Kansas City, then St. Louis.
Okay. Is there any kind of fan shindig happening because it's in Kansas City, or?
I heard there's a Wheat Fest that's going to happen in Kansas City.
Oh, nice. Okay. Well, those are always
And,
fun.
and St. Louis is at the Fabulous Fox, which is that's just one of those venues. It was, growing up in the Midwest, we always have, God, one day if we could just play the Fox, that would be awesome. And now we played it several times, but haven't been there since pre-COVID anyway. And it's always great to go back there. St. Louis is a great town to play. So, as is Kansas City. Yeah, we've got a lot of plans for Kansas City.
Oh, yeah.
First stop is we get in Wednesday night. We're headed straight for Grozzo's. I think 20 of us for a big Italian dinner.
Sounds good to me. Excellent. I could use a bit right now. I haven't even had lunch. Oh, so 50 years of Kansas. I mean, that's amazing. Yeah, I know when you guys started the band, there's no way you ever thought I'm going to be doing this 50 years from now. I'm wondering, when did it kind of dawn on you, hey, this is going to be a lifelong thing? And, 50 years might just happen. I mean, was there ever a time in the past 20 or 30 years where you thought, this is really clicking?
Well, at the start, coming from Topeka, our dreams were not that big. They were realistic. We wanted to, as we got a little bit older, we were tired of playing the bar circuit and wanted to play original material and all of that. And our hopes was to get to record an album and maybe break into the larger midwestern scene. That was like back in the 60s, you had like the Fabulous Flippers and Spider and the Crabs and all these bands that were the Young Rascal or the Young Raiders. There were these roving soul bands, 10-piece bands riding around an old school bus and playing all over the Midwest in these ballrooms. And God, if we could just put on an album, maybe we could break out of the local bar market. And so that was as lofty as our goal was, being realistic. And so, boom, the first album comes out, and all of a sudden we're on the road with Mott the Hoople and the Kinks. All of a sudden, we'd already achieved our highest goal. And so after that, it was just kind of a slow progression of enjoying the ride. And we're building an audience. And you didn't know things back then the way you do now. Like Pennsylvania caught on to us right away. But how would we know? And we did a crisscross the state, like 12 dates in Pennsylvania alone. And it was like we were like the Beatles there. And this is so weird. But it was always, I guess we were young enough and dumb enough to not really worry about the plan B. What is the plan? We didn't have a plan B. It was just the joy of making music with your friends. And we can worry about that stuff when we're old, like when we're like 30.
Sure. Right.
And so, and to fully answer your question, I think at 30 years is when I finally realized that, hey, Rich, I think this is what you do for a living. Until then, it was just album tour, a few changes, and then you keep going. But suddenly that 30-year mark, it seemed pretty official. We'd had our heyday, but we were still out there and we're still passionate about it. And then 40 seemed kind of automatic. There it is. Oh, wow. Now it's 40. That 10 years went quick. Suddenly it's 50. And it's a weightier moment. There's something about even wedding anniversary, your 10th, your 20th, your 30th, your 50th. There's something always tied to those round numbers like that. But 50, that's a half a century. That puts it in a different perspective altogether.
You betcha. That's
But
huge
when I look at it though, it's I've lived 10 lifetimes, but then again, it's gone in a flash, and it's still doing it for the same reason. It is it was always to avoid the workplace and to make music with my friends, and just the joy of that. And so that has just continued, and that's really the same reason today. Making records is not gosh, in the 70s, early 80s, anybody puts on an album and go gold. It just wasn't that hard to achieve. Now nobody buys hard product. When I say nobody, most people don't. It's just not the way things are done. Fortunately, we built our career on live performance because we signed a bad record deal with Kirshner in the beginning. And so we're honestly still out here because this is what we love to do. And the opportunity's there. Rich, what are you going to do when you retire? Well, what would you have me do? What do you want to go get a goofy hat and start playing golf? Nothing wrong with golf, but this is better. It just is.
You betcha. And it keeps you young,
Yeah,
It really does.
it's just we have it's called the Kansas mode. And what we try to do, Phil and I decided good 20 years ago, this has to be fun and profitable. And if either one of those aspects aren't there, it makes it really difficult to do.
Sure.
So the Kansas mode is like I leave on a Thursday. I left yesterday to get here to Wausau, Wisconsin yesterday. Spend the night in the city you're going to play. We play here. We'll drive down to Milwaukee, play. I'm home Sunday. And we do that all year.
That's the way to do it, man.
And you still get 80, 90 shows in a year easily.
Sure.
And so you never get burnt out. There's always a weekend to look forward to. It just really works well for us. Yesterday morning I was in my guitar room at 7 o'clock in the morning, going through the set and working on things, and was done by about 1 o'clock. That's my daily schedule when I'm home. So I'm getting ready for the next weekend, which is always fun to prepare for.
Sure. And I imagine, even though you're playing the same set each week, it still is good to kind of go in and polish it a little bit in between, right?
Well, I can practice at home and just stare out the window. And we live up in the mountains in North Carolina, and it's beautiful and a lot of wildlife running by the window. But practice by yourself isn't all that thrilling. It's like, oh boy, I can't wait to go through the set again.
Sure.
But it's a necessary thing to do to keep on top of things, because I'm playing with some pretty good players, and I'm not going to be the one that's slagging behind.
Right.
There is a bit of peer pressure still with all of that.
Sure.
But even when we rehearse before every show, in the dressing room, we have a dressing room set up. We rehearse for an hour, hour and a half, just running through things. And a lot of times song ideas will pop up at that time. Like, what do you just play there? And we record it, and it might be a little riff or whatever, and it gets logged for later development. So it's a good time. And so we basically walk from the dressing room warmed up, ready to go. We just carry that over onto the stage. So first song, we're locked in and ready. And that's just our routine. And so we have a home life. Everybody's got pets, kids, whatever to go home to. But then we've got a road family that we're so close to. The road crew is all my friends. I don't ever look or think of them as employees. They're my buds. Sure. And I love these guys. And so it's just always, we see each other Thursday night. Oh man, how you been? And it's just I recommend it for anybody.
Yeah, it sounds good. I think everybody needs a dose of that, if only they could. I was wondering, how big of a factor was the internet in the early 2000s in raising the profile of the band again? Because it seems like you guys kind of made that leap from being on the bus in the 90s
Yeah.
to these kind of little outdoor amphitheater sized places in the 2000s and on to these big theaters and such.
Well, the a lot of classic rock, in the 90s, classic rock was dead. Progressive rock was dead. Uh, but we were still slugging it out. And I call those the dark ages in the 90s when we were riding around on the bus. You'd get off the bus and walk in the back door of a club somewhere, and then you'd play, and then you get back on the bus, and then you'd walk out of the bus and get to the back. It's just a blur. There's just not a lot to remember about it except for just a lot of travel. So you'd be gone for 3-4 weeks, then you'd go home for a week, and then you'd back at it. And that was a grind.
I bet.
And it was a bit humbling, be going from playing Madison Square Garden to playing at a bar that's advertised in Kansas and Jello Slide.
Well, hopefully you got top billing.
Yeah, we did have top billing over
Oh,
the
thank
Jello Slide.
goodness.
But then people with the internet, started rediscovering a lot of music. I can remember my middle son comes up to me one day. This is like, with Napster first started and stuff, and he was stealing music right and left. And he comes up to me one day and he goes, "Dad, have you ever heard of a band called Crosby, Stills and Nash?" I said, "Yeah, I've played with them." And he was so excited in his discovery because they were playing before he was born, but they were new to him. And so many younger people started discovering us as well as other classic rock bands in that journey. And it's kind of proof of what a great period that time was. The music, of so many of these groups that are our peers. So many of them are still out there and doing great. A lot of great stuff came out at that time.
Absolutely,
So
and it's pretty timeless.
yeah, and that was a very important part of the rediscovery of Kansas.
Yeah, well, I thought that.
Was the internet.
Yeah, I think the 2000s were a fun time to be a Kansas fan. You guys were, somewhere to elsewhere in that whole era. I was put on some great shows back then. That was a great album.
There's always the flip side of that, which is the internet has basically killed the record business.
Yeah,
Um, it's Taylor Swift can put out a record and it's God knows how many times platinum in an instant. But there's only a handful of Taylor Swifts. Everybody else is slugging it out to sell a few 100,000 albums if they're lucky. It's a hard product, doesn't exist on the scale it once did. Music stores. It's hard. Our record stores. It's hard to find one anymore. It's not a vintage used store. Whereas it was the word of mouth pre-internet was, there's a new Beatles album out, and they don't have it in Topeka, so you call, Keith's and Lawrence. Yeah, we just got a shipment in, so you drive there as fast as you can to buy it. There was a different excitement.
Oh yeah.
In the everything now is you want something, you push a button, boom, it downloads on your phone, you got it.
Well, it's sort of the magic of waiting for something and being surprised.
Absolutely,
kind of gone.
Instant gratitude is very overrated.
I was going to say overrated. Yeah.
Yeah, it's towards the anticipation of from a concert to an album coming out or whatever, and then to hold that product in your hands. And everybody I knew would stare at the cover, stare at the back, look at the liner notes and all that, and while listening to it, and all of this was painting a picture of who these guys were and what this was about and all of that.
There was an air of mystery too. It's like you
absolutely
really know too much. Nowadays, you know everybody's dirty laundry, and sometimes it kind of taints your perception of a band when you know too much. I mean,
That I
I can
agree.
think,
That's when
not
we
you
did.
guys, but I can think of a few where,
Well,
they've 30 people in and out and a lot of history, and it's almost best to not know half of that, It's
I mean, let's face it. Every band has the story of the naughty boys doing naughty things.
sure.
Yeah, I mean that just comes with
It's
the
rock and roll,
territory.
man.
Yeah, but it's when we did the documentary "Miracles Out of Nowhere." What we wanted to do, and the only way we really get everybody to agree to do it, was we're not going to go there. We're not going to put out the dirty laundry. We're going to tell the story of coming from Topeka, Kansas, and climbing the mountain.
Yeah, I mean,
And that story is inspiring. The other stuff is just tabloid horseshit.
pretty much. Yeah, I mean, it's about the music, It's that's really where it should stay. Um, so, you got a kind of a new lineup going for this 50th anniversary tour. I was kind of curious about kind of how the change went down, and I know David Ragsdale is basically retired now. I was kind of curious what inspired that and how you wound up finding your new violinist, who, by the way, is awesome.
Well, I'm not going to delve deep into David.
Yeah, don't go too deep.
I love David, and we all do, and
Yeah,
nobody wanted him to go, but it's personal health reasons. And I wouldn't say any more than that. Out of respect for David. So that put us in a scramble. You think it's hard to find like a bass player that sings good. Try to find a rock violinist. I mean, that's rarefied air.
yes, it
And
is. Absolutely.
but we searched through uh, Phil plays Yamaha drums, so he's got a lot of connections to Yamaha. They sent us all sorts of people, but they were violinists. They weren't rock violinists, and it just took a while. Fortunately, Tom Brislin, keyboard player, lives in Jersey, where Joe lives, just a few miles away, and he was friends with him, and so he said, "Let me talk to Joe." And so we went back and forth a bit and talking, and he demoed a few things and this and that. And so we thought, yeah, this could work. And the further along we got with it, and how quickly he was picking things up, we realized, this guy's the real thing. And what a pedigree, my God. I mean, he's a Russian immigrant. He moved here when he was 4 years old. His family moved to Cleveland. Symphony players. They played with his father and I think uncle played with the Cleveland Symphony, which is where Joe grew up. Then he moved to Jersey. His wife plays for the violin for the New York Philharmonic. He's got a master's in jazz violin. He's been on countless albums of every genre you can think of, plus his own band. I think he has 6 albums out and is the lead singer of that. So the guy, it's one thing to find somebody that's pretty good, but also you need somebody that understands what it's like to be in a band, to travel, all of those things, to perform in front of people. It took a bit of hunting, and we were very fortunate to find Joe. And what's the icing on the cake of Joe is he's as nice a guy as I've ever met. And so he fits in right away.
That's awesome. I think some of us that are kind of hip to the prog scene these days kind of know about him already. And, when I
Uh-huh.
heard Rags was leaving, I'm like, well, Joe's a shoe in. Well, yeah, I guess he was. So glad you
Well,
guys hooked up.
I saw your comment about that,
Oh, did you? Okay.
and that was before he was brought to our attention.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I saw. You had mentioned that, and then Tom calls, a day or two later, and say, "I've got a guy," and Joe Deninzon. I thought, Where did that name? Oh, Sean was just talking about that.
Okay, well that's cool. Yeah, yeah, man, he's great, and his band Stratospherius is really awesome too. So I would suggest y'all check them out as well. And hook it up with Tom. I mean, again, most of us prog folks know Tom and have seen him play with Yes and Renaissance and a number of bands. So when I heard he was going to be your keyboard guy, it was just like I knew what he was bringing to the party for you guys. A level of attention to detail that's just second to none. Super professional, just a great hang too. Really, really awesome.
Yeah.
And I hear Tom's now the musical director. Is that right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You couldn't be in better hands than
Oh,
with
I
Tom
bet. Yeah.
handling that. Yeah, I'd met Tom at Progstock or Progfest in or was that
Or
held
was it Nearfest?
or Nearfest? I'm
There
sorry.
you go.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay. I remember
and
that. The year you played with Glass Hammer.
yeah, and I was playing with Glass Hammer, and Tom played with Camel. And a friend of mine was doing photography for Tom for his band Spiraling, and so I got to meet Tom at Nearfest, and that's the first time I'd ever seen Camel. Blew me away.
Oh, I loved it. Yeah.
Oh, just blew me away. What a great guitar player, the sweetest tone.
Oh, Andy Latimer.
And
Yeah.
I talked to Andy a little bit, and he was a great guy. And so I was aware of Tom, and then I was told that he's getting ready to be Rick Wakeman to replace him. And I thought, oh my God, Tom is older than he looks, and when he was with Yes, he looked like he was 16.
Right.
And I thought, what a talented kid. So when we were looking for a keyboard player, when Steve retired, I never even thought he would be available. It wasn't even a consideration. And then Thomas Weber with Inside Out says, I know a guy, you need to call Tom Brislin. I said, yeah, he's available? and we called him, and he was all in. Again, like Joe, two peas in a pod. You couldn't meet two nicer guys. I mean, I'm a pretty good guy, but I can be an asshole sometimes. These guys are just genuinely nice guys all the time.
Well, that's just so great how things, fell together pretty quickly. It's almost like you didn't miss a beat. And
Well,
pretty cool too.
Phil and I have Dave and Carrie left. We want to do something else. We quit. We survived that nuclear explosion, and pretty quickly. And Steve had quit, came back. Steve, we've had people come and go. Robby left, come back. We've survived all of those. We became very good at recoiling and rebuilding, and not anticipating it, but knowing that nothing is going to last forever. Somebody could get sick, somebody could get tired of doing it, whatever. So we have kind of learned how to have a plan B. And even like now, we've got replacements.
Yeah, understudies, right?
Yeah, understudies, because COVID did that. When Billy got COVID, we lost 16 shows. We made most of them up later, but still, that was a pretty big hit for everybody, especially the crew guys. And so we, contact certain people and pay them to learn the charts, basically. And they stay on top of it. We keep in touch. And how things going? You ready to go? Yeah. So at the drop of a hat, we have stand-ins for all of us.
Okay.
And my stand-in is Zach Risby. He's agreed to do that.
Oh, excellent. Well, yeah, and I was kind of wondering how he's doing.
Yeah, I almost missed a show last week because my wife got sick on the way to the airport, and we had to go to the hospital, and she was fine. We were released, and we made the show. But Zach had earlier agreed to be my understudy, and so Tom called him and Booms. I said, yeah, I'll do it. I'm in. I know all these songs. And the only downside of that is, I would love to see Zach again. And I'll be the one guy that won't get to be
We'll
there.
see. Yeah.
So it'll be a great reunion for everybody else, but I won't get to be part of
Am I right that you've only missed one show?
it.
I remember one back in the 2000s when Carrie filled in for you.
Carrie filled in for one show in Las Vegas in 2000 because I had a scheduled stomach operation and a gig came up. So Carrie filled in. So we were that was it was an off time. We weren't planning on being anywhere, so I don't really count that one. But I did miss a show just before COVID. I got very anemic, and we had to cancel a show in somewhere in Texas, and that tainted my record.
Oh, well, it's amazing anyway. I mean, come on, thousands at this point.
Yeah, I haven't even dared count anymore.
So I was looking at the set list, and I don't want to give anything away for anybody that hasn't seen it yet. But you guys have worked in some new material, some new old material, I should say. You're
Yes.
playing a couple epics that haven't really been played in their entirety since the 70s.
Yeah.
You played little pieces of them here and there as bridges thrown into other songs. I think one part of one landed in Opus Insert for a few years back in the day. But now you're playing them top to bottom, and I was just curious what it's like relearning a piece like that, and if there's any left in your like. Sometimes I'll learn a song I hadn't played for 20 years, and my hands remember it quicker than my brain does. I was curious if you had any of that going on when you went to relearn these songs.
I had some of it, some muscle memory, and but it's hard to talk about songs and not talk about the song.
Right.
But yeah, one of them was I've been in talking with fans. When are you going to play this? When are you going to play this? Play this. The next tour, you got to play this. I got tired of hearing that, and then finally, with the 50th, said, Phil, we got to play it. This is the time. This is a song that I've been wanting to hear for at least 45 years. The fans have been wanting to hear for that long. This is for the hardcore people that have been with us for 50 years. And Phil was all in too. It's these two songs in particular that we've added they're my favorite part of the night right now because they're the oldest, they're also the freshest.
Right.
and the newest. So it's a lot of fun to do. This tour will go through 2024. By the end of it, probably the new will wear off, but right now it's still you're having flashbacks of being in rehearsals with the original guys, original six, and being in the studio and working things out, and arrangement changes and stuff like that. You're recalling how great you felt in practice when you worked it up. And this is such a cool song. That's all fresh to me again. That feeling, and I will hold on to it as long as I can.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, they are definitely stunning live. I think people are going to be really excited to hear them. And you guys are going to be here at the Fox, our fabulous Fox. Every Fox theater is fabulous, I think, because they're all like really old.
Yeah, I can't even. I think the last time I was at the Fox was the Leonard Skinner reunion, and they played one show at the Fox, and Steve Morse had just joined Kansas, and they invited him to play with them. A lot of local people that they had known were up on stage with them for this single reunion show. I think that's the last time I was there.
Wow.
So we're going back into the 80s.
So Kansas has never played at Atlanta's Fox before?
Oh yeah, we
You
we did
thought you
a.
had.
I think we did a New Year's there. We did I think a Halloween there. Probably been there 4 or 5 times.
Okay. Well, it's a great
Um,
place to see a show. I mean, it's just,
yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. And the other time I was here was Jerry Gilland, who was our tour manager. He came with Steve from St. Joe. He was just our first roadie, and he grew up. He left us to be the road manager for the Rolling Stones eventually. And on a Stones tour, they were playing clubs on occasion, and then they played the Fox.
oh, wow.
And Jerry got us all tickets, so we were all up in the balcony for the Stones Fox show. That's one of my last memories of being there. So it's been a long time.
I've seen a few. Saw Dream Theater there a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I saw they were there. I'll
Yeah,
bet it was fantastic.
that was pretty darn cool. That was definitely the prog metal triple bill of the year for sure. So
Uh-huh.
go check that out. But I'm actually more excited to see you guys.
Yeah, I'm
Very
excited to be
close to
there
my heart.
again. It's a lot of, I mean, a lot of memories there, personal and career. 2 wives. uh, yeah, and the times and those times. Yeah, the bands. Neil Preston, the famous rock photographer, was traveling with us, and a lot of pictures of us from the Fox, especially candid backstage photos and stuff like that. Just so many memories. Across the street was Alex Cooley's Electric Ballroom, which
Right?
was what broke the door down for us in getting into the Atlanta market. And we fell in love with Atlanta and moved there
Yeah, I was gonna say,
because
what
of
was the big push to go to Atlanta? Why Atlanta?
well, it's pretty simple. You know, we're in Topeka, and now we're traveling a lot. We get to Atlanta, we're playing Alex Cooley's, which was like a week gig. Atlanta was such a musical town, so vibrant, especially at that time. Uh, and Alex Cooley's Electric Ballroom was the happening spot. Well, Kerry Livgren, Dave Hope, and Phil Ehart all met their wives at Alex Cooley's. Now, two of these, Vicki Livgren wasn't, but the other two were working for what was Southern Airlines at the time. So it didn't make any sense to, when they got married, to drag them to Topeka. But then you leave for 300 days a year. They had their own jobs there, and we loved Atlanta. It was just, again, such a musical time in Atlanta. And so we one by one moved there. I'd gotten married to my first wife and had moved. I lived in Crown Center in Kansas City. But as we were starting to work on Point of Return, uh, Steve Walsh was living down in Peachtree City, and he arranged for me to have an apartment there. And we fell in love with the area. And since the band was basically now based out of there, road crew, everybody was there. It was time to move to be more a part of the organization. So we moved to Atlanta too. And so basically it was the music scene, but I think it was more because of the women.
Right. I just kept things simple, keep them close to their work. You'll how to be an easier way than
What and what
go to the Midwest.
we were used to being transplanted, whereas this was their home and where they worked. So it just made sense.
Sure, I totally get it. It's just, the music scene there is a scene here. In Topeka, there's nothing really.
No, I mean there's still people slugging it out there.
There are, absolutely. I've got some friends that have bands there,
Yeah, I mean
and
Mark and
and
the Sharks.
now, Rich knows this, but I'm actually from Topeka as well. For any of that are tuning in and didn't know, so if we talk about a few places that you don't know the name of, well, you'll just have to go to Topeka and go get a piece of pie at Bobo's on your own.
Absolutely, double and a double steak burger with cheese.
Exactly. Yeah. Um, So I wanted to talk a little bit about. Oh, first I wanted to ask you. You guys have played a biggest chunk of your back catalog. Are there any songs that you personally would love to cover or dust off that you haven't ever done since the '70s?
Ah, boy. Well, with what we've added to this show, the ones I wanted the most, we are doing.
So kind of tick those boxes this year.
And then when we did the Leftoverture tour and the Point of No Return tour, we covered everything on those.
Yeah.
Uh, it's a good question. Nothing sticks out at the moment. Kind of have to pick up the album and look at it and go,
I hear you.
oh yeah, yeah, that because after the 50th tour is over, um, what do you do?
Yeah,
Yeah,
51 just seems a little.
now it's the 51st.
I know, and you've
uh,
kind of already done your big tours where you cover an album back to back, your two biggest albums. I mean, a lot of people were like, well, they do Monolith, and it's like, I doubt it because it just wasn't the same big seller that the other two were. I don't think it's as well known.
we had like we start off a million, 2 million, then Point comes up 3 million, 4 million, and now let you lapse that. But Monolith was the first sign that maybe our time is passing because it only went platinum. Which,
Right.
I don't know where it stands today. It could be double platinum now, but it was kind of a disappointment to us. We thought, wow, is our career waning? Uh, but to go back to those is always very tempting. If we did another album in its entirety, gosh, it'd be a hard one to pick. And again, we'd already did the biggest ones.
Yeah, really.
I mean, redoing the first album, it eventually became platinum, but that's just after 40 years of nickeling and diming is way up there. So we always come up with something. When we didn't have a record deal, and this we reinvented ourselves with working with the symphony and did
Yeah.
symphony tours. So there's going to be something. I know we're due for a record. We've got a few things in the can. It's really getting the time right now to start sussing out some of the material and finding a direction. And now with Joe being a composer himself, that's exciting. That adds a lot more depth to where we could be going. So to do another album makes a lot of sense logically. And there's always the need to scratch the creative itch.
Sure. Yeah, I
Um,
was going to say that because, for a lot of '70s bands, I think, back in the day, success was totally measured by record sales. It's like, how do you divorce yourself from that mindset and just do it for art's sake? You know what I mean? And that's kind of what it is at this point.
well, what I said earlier, we signed a terrible deal with Don Kirshner. Um, First off, I said, guys, I'm a publisher. And so you will sign your publishing over to me. That's a deal breaker. And what did we know? One of the representatives said, oh, that's just sheet music and stuff. Don't worry about it. We didn't know it was half of the pie
Right.
that we had signed away. Um, and I think we got basically 50 cents a record, or 25 cents a record. And out of that portion, we had to pay back all recording costs, all tour support costs, everything came out of our quarter. It took a long time to pay that debt off.
I bet.
I think probably when Leftoverture went platinum, I think that's around the time that we became square with the record
Broke
company
even.
and could start actually seeing some proceeds from the sales of these things. So we've always built our model on live performance. From selling merchandise and performing live. that was the one thing we could always count on, that we were in control of, because songwriters are different. They're getting paid from record one. You sell 10 records, they're going to get their share of those 10 records, period. So it does tip the scales and balance of a band when it starts off flat, and all of a sudden the songwriters are here, and the rest of it is going, we got to play more, and they're going, well, I'm kind of tired. The dynamics change in that, in the inequity of it. It's fair. It's the way it's always been. That's song. Of course, the songwriter should get paid for writing the song, but it was such a crappy record deal that the rest of us were not doing all that well, and so playing a lot is what kept the rest of us motivated. Fast forward to these times. Well, shit, we've always done it this way. Right. There's never been any money for us in the actual record business. But, again, scratching the creative itch, and to keep your fan base interested in you, the fan base always want to hear something, what are you up to now? You got a new guy. What are you guys going to do? See conversations all the time about it. I wonder what's going to happen now that, this guy, now this guy's in. And right, so
you want more. You just I love this band. I can't wait to hear what they do next.
And Phil and I are always trying to steer the ship in, what is the music? We just call it Kansas music, and we know what it is when we hear it, and we know how to twist and turn it if it's not quite there. And so really that's our goal. We're not trying to reinvent ourselves. We're trying to remain ourselves in this process.
I think those are the best albums in a way. I mean, the 80s, everybody was reinventing themselves. So, of course, those records are going to be different. But, it seems like y'all kind of got back to doing what you do best, which is kind of, the more progressive stuff. Like there ain't going to be no hit radio stuff these days. So let's just write ambitious music we can.
We're 20 years past hit radio.
Yeah.
There's no relevance to us and it. But I remember we had a meeting, Phil and I, with a record company exec with CBS. I won't mention his name. That they actually owed us a few records, and so we met at the Hotel California. And he bought us lunch, and he said, "Guys, nobody cares. You're done. We don't want to do any more records with you." And nobody cares. Management was saying, there's no interest. And so that was very disheartening. And so we had a hiatus for a while. What everybody missed was their fan base. Completely swing and a miss. And you put a lot of trust in the executives that they know what they're talking about. And since then, we've managed ourselves. We shop our own record deals. We record when and where and what we want to. And if it's not this year, it's next year. We're back to taking all of that under our control. And this is what we are. This is what we're going to do. And that's it. And it's nice to be in control of your own destiny instead of being.
Well, I think that the music that comes out of it is very true to who you all are. The last two records have been a great return to form, I think.
I very much think so too. There was, in the MCA days, and that there was a lot of pressure for hits. A lot of pressure. Go back in the studio. You're not done. We, okay, here's some songs from outside writers. We're looking for more. Which I understand that. If I'm selling shoes, I have a shoe company. I want to stay on top of the hottest new trend. So I'm going to tell all my designers that you guys need to get on the ball. But these red ball jets have been popular forever. But no, stop that. You're going to start making this. We were never good at trying to follow a trend. You need to be more like this. No, we don't. We're going to stay on the horse we rode in on. I think honesty makes you believable. It's like
Very much.
Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Big fan. Because nothing prog about him whatsoever.
No.
But boy, I believe them. Tom Petty was real.
Yeah.
And that comes through. That was an honest band. The Allman Brothers. This is a real band. This isn't an act. It isn't a combo. They're not, this band is a real band. And that's something I've always set my sights on, being genuine. Like it or not. But at least we can look ourselves in the mirror and go, well, we blew that one, but at least it was us.
Oh yeah. Well, you didn't blow nothing this time around. The most recent album, The Absence of Presence, is I think one of y'all's best.
I think both of those albums stand up with anything we've done. Getting to know Zach Risby, and he's missed. He was such an integral part of on the production side, engineering side, and songwriting. Gosh, he was we had no idea he was so musical. Hated to see him go.
Yeah.
But, this lifestyle isn't for everybody. I mean, I've seen a lot of mighty tall oaks fall, in the process. It's just, for some reason, I was built for this. And I knew it before I even had a guitar. I was built for the road life.
Well, speaking of guitars, I wanted to touch a bit on your different ones that you've used over the years. I thought maybe we kind of start now and work backwards. Lately, I've seen you using a really nice gold Les Paul. It's kind of cool to see you playing a Gibson again. But I also see you using your PRS. Is that the one you've had since like the '90s?
That was my first
I
PRS.
thought
Yes.
so. Yeah. Do you still have the Dragon?
Oh yeah. Paul told me to leave it home.
Yeah.
He said they're becoming too valuable.
Too precious. Yeah.
And so I did. And plus, my eyesight is not anything what it once was. I've got macular degeneration. And trying to navigate your way around that neck
With the Dragon inlay, yeah.
With that, it's really hard for me to pick it up and play it now. I just can't see where I'm going on it. But the Les Paul's got those big crowns on it. Right. It's a lot easier to see, and plus I've got lights on the side of the neck, which helps a lot. But yeah, I have two of those. It's actually I have three gold tops. My first one was one I bought at Steam Music in Topeka.
I was going to ask, what were the music stores back in the day, like in the late '60s? I'm thinking Steam. There was like Jenkins downtown if you wanted a horn or something, right?
Yeah, you had Jenkins downtown, and then you had Jenkins out at White Lakes Mall. And then you had Midwestern Music.
Sure, I took lessons there.
Yeah, I did too. Jim Swartz gave me guitar lessons.
Yeah.
Then there was then Steam opened up over in College Hill. There was one, I can't remember the name of it now, that sold all the box stuff. It was in North Topeka over by Gage Bowl North, in that area. I know there's a few specialty guitar stores in Topeka now, but God, I've been out of that whole Topeka music scene market for such a long time that I don't even know where they are.
I think Steam's still around.
Oh no, Steam's gone.
It's gone, is it? Okay. I haven't been back in about 5 years, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, he's been gone for about that long, at least.
Okay.
We lived, me and Dave Hope we'd get up, and I'd go pick him up, and we'd go over to Steam Music. We'd just sit there all day playing guitars and talking to different guys when they came in the door. I'm sure Don and Jake were probably not real happy with us two slobs and getting all the guitars dirty, but we lived there every day. And there's something that's special about, and before that, hanging around Midwestern music, they had the little guitar room. And boy, that was a room that dreams were made of. I wish I had every guitar that was in that room now, back in the, later 60s.
Oh, yeah.
Some great stuff. But there was just different guys coming in. Hey, man, how you doing? Oh, we're playing in Salina this weekend and whatever. And so it was a meeting place for the local musicians to hang out. And me and Dave didn't have anything better to do, so we'd spend most of the day there.
Was this when you guys were living in the band house over on Roosevelt?
I never lived there.
You never lived there. You had the luxury of living in a regular home.
Yes, I lived at home. At that time, I was in college, and I would go over there, and they did rehearse in that house, yes. That my early band, the first one with Phil, it was a 66 called The Pets. And we rehearsed in my basement, in my garage, and at Phil's house, at Greg Allen's house. We would our parents would allow us to make the racket, in the basement from time to time.
Sure.
But the Roosevelt house, no, I used to visit there, but that was in my college days.
So you weren't in the band at the time?
I wasn't at that band house, no. Plus, it wasn't all that appealing to me to, you've got, the band guys and a couple crew guys living in an old small house, doubled up in rooms, guys sleeping in a closet. And it was a typical band house. It was just a bunch of junk and old used furniture. And the living room was full of band gear. It was, I was living in my parents' basement. And that was nice.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure that was much better. You're over on the other side of town where everything's newer. Yeah. So the guitar that we've seen you play the most in this old footage, the Gibson L, what is it?
It's an L6S.
Okay. Where'd you get that? Was that one of the ones you got in Topeka?
Yeah, I got that at Midwestern Music. I had a 335 it was a second, had a 2 on the back, which now those are even more, the seconds are more rare than the perfect ones. I bought that from Terry Wireman from the Flippers. Prior to that, I had a white Telecaster with a Bigsby on it. Now, those darn things would never stand tune. I've never been a Bigsby fan. And a band I was in with Jeff Glicksman, Dave Hope, called The Chosen Ones, auditioned because this company out in Hayes owned the name The Rain, and The Rain had been around for a long time. And so it would kind of up our price in our district we were playing in. So we auditioned, and they said, you guys can do it, but you got to get rid of that Tweasley sounding guitar and buy Terry's guitar. Okay. So I think it was just a ploy. So I sold my Telecaster and bought Terry Wireman's 335. I'd give anything to still have that today. Terry Wireman was the original guitar player with the Flippers. And so I played that in all the bands previous to, like in the early White Clover and stuff like that, when we were living in New Orleans. When we got the deal with Don Kirshner, hanging around Midwestern Music, I don't think Steam was open yet. And the guy said, Rich, the 335, that's a cowboy guitar. We're not cowboys. And meanwhile, there's this new Gibson that's in here, the L6S, and it's the newest thing on the market. So it still pisses me off that I yielded to the pressure, and I bought that guitar. But I didn't I wasn't in a position then to add something to my collection. It was always, trading.
Right.
And so I traded that 335 for the L6S. And I really love that guitar. It's almost like a student guitar. The neck is so small. And the first time I've ever played a 2-octave neck, it's like, what am I doing way up here? How do I even, you couldn't ever get there on
You're
another
kind of
guitar.
lost up there if you're not careful.
Oh, very much so. And so that was my guitar for, gosh, I think the next guitar I bought was Jake Jacoby's. He had a gold top. It was the reissue of the 58 or 59 gold top. And he had it, and they came with the small humbuckers, and he drove that out and put big ones in it, which I wish he wouldn't have done. But that was my second, guitar to have on the road. Then I also bought Jake's a 66 Fender Strat. Both of those I still have.
So was the first album all the L?
L6, yeah.
Yeah, that was all that. How about Song for America? Was that the same guitar too?
Same, yeah.
Pretty much
And
up
Masque.
through and Mask.
Masque.
Okay, around Leftovertures when you got the other Gibson.
Yeah, but it was more of my spare. I wasn't playing it all the time, but it was just nice to have. Then so we started making a little bit of money, so I thought, I'm going to buy a Strat. So I bought a Strat. I've got one. I'm not a Strat guy. I watch people.
Kansas music doesn't seem like single coil music to me.
No, it just isn't. And I watched like Eric Johnson and Steve Morse, all these guys, and just tearing it up. And these great sounds. And in my hands, they just don't work. Yeah, but it's a good tool to have for just in the studio.
Sure.
A lot of it has its place, but as a main guitar, although like the Strat with the double coil.
Oh yeah.
Zach played one of those, and that worked great for me. Yeah, I could play that all day.
That's the sound I like too. I mean, I played a Les for years before I even got a Strat, and the single coils always sounded kind of wimpy to me. So I got a Strat with 2 humbuckers, and that was perfect.
Oh yeah. Now the first one I had, it's called the Robby, after Robby Steinhardt, because Robby flipping around on stage, and it was on a stand, and he hit it, and boom.
Oh man!
And like every Gibson does, it popped in that one spot.
Sure.
And it took me forever to find someone that could. It was fixed, and then it had to be refixed and fixed and fixed again. Jeff Lexman tried to fix it the first time, and finally I got it to a guy in Atlanta that finally did a repair and slimmed the neck down a little bit while he was at it. And then it sat in the closet for a long time. And it wasn't really during COVID. We sold all our property and moved to one place in the mountains. And that was the first time I got all of my stuff out of storage and in one place. And then I started playing it. And what really got me to the Les Paul, because I was familiar with it, and they just do things differently than like a Paul Reed Smith will, just in the switching itself. But we were playing in Macon, and the Allman Brothers Museum contacted me to see if I would like to play Duane Allman's Les Paul for the show. I said, yeah.
Sure, yeah.
And so they brought it. It came with a bodyguard. And I got to play it on, I played it on like 4 songs, and it was really cool. And I thought, I'd kind of forgotten, I'd been playing Paul Reed Smith for so long. I've kind of forgotten what this different animal was, and it got me the itch. So I talked to a friend of mine in St. Louis. He's a really good guitar player, collector. He's in a band. And he said, well, I've got this gold top. Let me send it to you to see if you like it. It said, 2012 Leroy Parnell Les Paul, and they're different. They have the heel is cut away, and so you can get up higher on the neck. And it has these, was it Perry Ellis, something Ellis pickups in it, which are remarkable pickups. I thought, well, I'll just buy some pickups. Well, it was $900 for the pair.
Wow.
So I'll just buy the guitar.
Right.
And really high quality electronics. And I bought it and I loved it. And this was right when Tom Brislin had joined the band. And so my wife, Debbie, found an identical one, because I always like to have if I'm playing something, I like to have a spare of it. She found an identical one at the Guitar Center in Dallas, and she surprised me with that. So I've got one to practice on at home and then one on the road. And I was playing just that for a while, but when we started playing the longer show, with Point of No Return, for example, it was killing my back. This thing's a beast. Especially like playing acoustic, where I'm leaning over with that weight pulling down and reaching over. It was just murder my back. So I decided I need to, start playing the PRSs also, just to give myself a break. And it was nice to get back on those. It's funny how guitars, suddenly you can't find what the magic that was in it, because you found it in something else. And then you go back to it and it's like, oh yeah. Guitar players, we're weird.
Yeah, we are. I mean, and it's like that. Some you could have a collection, and some days one just kind of hollers at you and says, "Hey, I'm hot. Play me today."
Yeah,
you don't really even know why. We should probably wrap it up here pretty quick, but I wanted to pick your brain about your favorite songs from each Kansas album, and I'll throw mine in for contrast, just for fun. First album. What's one that pops in your head that's just like this is one of my very favorites? And it could be just, from a live perspective, like it's so much fun to play in concert or just in general.
I think if I picked on aesthetics, I would take the Pinnacle for a favorite. For appreciation would be Can I Tell You, because that was the song. Without that song, we wouldn't be here.
Right, and that's one that you've recently redid for the best of Another Fork in the Road.
Yes, we thought, okay, we got to do something besides just re-release it. So, what would make the most sense? Well, let's go back to the first album and redo the song that brought us here. And so that's what we did. And it was also kind of an experiment, because coming out of the COVID era and stuff, and you never knew where things were going to be. So we recorded, remotely, individually from home. Phil went to the studio outside of Atlanta and did the drum tracks, and he played along to the original track.
Okay.
Just to keep the same tempo, and it varies a bit. And all that was, that was cut in New York on a shoestring budget. Okay, that's good enough.
Right.
Yeah. So
no click or any of that, right?
Oh no. I was the click on the first couple of albums, and the click, we would have a track, and I would tap a microphone with a pencil.
Oh wow!
And that became the click tracks in, like there's let's say in Miracle, say, where the opening, and then the acoustic section before it goes into the first verse. And so I would just tick through that as we're cutting basic tracks. So when we come in to cut the acoustic tracks, it would be something to play along to, because it's a pretty big hole to guess.
Right. Yeah. I can see that.
But I cut all my tracks, from my guitar room at home. Billy Greer cut all his from home. Tom did his from home. Ronnie sang all his parts from the bathroom in Chicago.
Sounds great.
And Ragsdale cut his violin tracks, from his computer, So that it was in anticipating what the future may be in recording, and gosh, what I can do on my laptop now, the Beatles could never do.
Right.
Back then, it's the there are no limits to what you can do at home. It shows you how great some of the old recordings are. When suddenly we don't have a 4-track machine, we've got an 8-track machine.
Right.
And, George Martin is putting together Sgt. Pepper's. It blows my mind today of what was accomplished back then. But we did find out that we can do this remotely. So we might do a lot of things in the future, especially in putting material together. Like, I've got this idea. Okay, then I go to Tom. What do you think? Well, that leads right into this thing I'm working on, and then you ping pong it around, and bass part gets put on and stuff, and all of a sudden you've got a demo structure of the possibility of a new song. Sure. So for all those things, it's great, but you can actually get professional sounding recordings by doing it in that fashion. Drums a little tougher,
Sure, you need a happening drum track to really build upon.
Yeah.
So,
but if I'm going direct, it doesn't matter if I'm doing it at the studio, at home, on Pluto. It just doesn't matter.
Right. Okay, so favorites. I think first album I'm going to have to pick Journey from Mary Brown. I mean, that's
there you go. That's another tough one. That was we were kind of cutting our teeth on stuff that didn't follow your basic 4/4 formula, and that was one of them. That and even Miracles Out of Nowhere, those beginnings. Now I just hear them in 4/4. Sure. They just all sound good. But at the time, it was very clever and hard to grasp. We went through it. Those songs, great open. So I'm changing my mind.
Yeah. Well, you said Pinnacle, but that's on Masque, so you can save that for.
Oh, okay, that's right.
Okay, then
I've got a terrible memory with that. With song titles.
Like second album, Song for America. I mean, I got to pick the title track. I mean, that
I do too. Yeah,
ultimate
absolutely.
Kansas song.
When we first worked up the beginning, it's just me and Dave and the drums. Cool groove. I mean, when that hits, it is goosebumps. It is so monstrous. It's hard to even depict what that is exactly. What style? What era? What is it? Copeland? I mean, what is this? It was just very majestic and powerful.
It really is. I mean, I've had the pleasure of playing it a few times at some wheat fests and such, and it's just, you can't help but smile when you're playing that. It's just, as it's building up to that moment about a minute and a half in.
Yeah.
And it's like you're just kind of floating through the air over that arpeggio.
And that's one of those, I hadn't played in a while, start playing again in front of a crowd a while back, and I almost started crying. I mean, to see the reaction.
Oh, man.
And, the emotion, all of a sudden it all comes flooding back to you. When you only had 2 albums or so, and we're playing this, here's a new song we're going to play. And how excited you were then, and all of a sudden it comes flooding back. And the fans' reaction, because they haven't heard you play it in a few years. Music is funny that way, and it hits us all.
Yeah.
Even if it's your own.
I love the version that y'all are doing now too, kind of the long version. I think since Tom, you got Tom, he does that whole piano bit in the middle that kind of truncated.
That part's hard.
Yeah.
And Tom nails it every night. Every night. And actually, when we did that on Don Kirshner, Kerry said he was just terrified because we're in the Santa Monica Civic Center, and they bring the import in the audience, but you've got cameras on stage, and so this guy is just like he's right on top of Kerry's hands, and we're all scared shitless,
right?
And this is live. Yeah, it's going to be chronicled for all time. Relax. I mean,
right.
And plus,
no pressure.
a camera in your face like that in your life, unless it's your uncle's when you're at your 5th birthday party or something. You've
Right.
never
Yeah.
been around something like that. So it's a hard part to play.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's because of the time signature of it. I mean, if one of the wheels falls off the wagon, it just comes crashing to an ugly, ugly crash
Well, it's
and
probably
burn.
hard to get back on the wagon once you fall off, so to
Well, we
speak.
have an escape route that we devised. This was early on with the original 6. Um, if suddenly all of a sudden Phil gets off and now we're backwards and he can't find it, and then people start, you can't, who am I following? Finally, we would, okay, just everybody just keep going, but slow it down, speed it up, and dissolve into this deep fifths noise. And then it dissolves, and then like Carrie would come in, and we would take right off and finish the song. And so one night that happened. And Merle McLean, speaking, who was our lighting man at the time, came back stage afterwards, goes, "Why didn't you guys tell me about the new arrangement?" He thought it was intentional.
Oh, wow.
Because we covered our tracks very well. But I guarantee you, on my deathbed, I will relive that moment. That will be one of my final thoughts is the horror of, it's like, I think a musician's biggest fear is just suddenly being buck naked on stage. Just
Right.
the wheels completely fall off the wagon, and here I am. You don't do that. No matter what, you don't stop. Don't stop for anything.
Right. Just
And
don't even
music,
make a face, you know. It's
yeah, I
tempting to go,
meant to do
oh,
that.
you know, but it's like don't let them see you sweat, as they say.
Yeah.
So, third album, you said Pinnacle. I gotta agree. I mean, but there's so many amazing songs on that thing. You know, the whole Mysteries and Mayhem leading into it is maybe the most epic moment, the longest one, because originally that was one piece of music, right? And then they kind of chopped it in half for the sake of radio play
Well,
or whatever.
the record companies are always trying to figure out how to make a single out of something. They tried to make a single out of Song for America. They
Yeah,
edited it down to 3.5 minutes, and it's comical.
yeah, it's like a rough
Uh,
edit to say the least.
but yeah, Pinnacle is definitely a highlight of
Yeah, I
that for
think
me.
it's aptly named. You know, um, and then Leftoverture. What's your favorite from that one?
Kind of hard to pick.
I know, I'm sure.
Wayward Son, for my gratefulness for it. Um, that was the song that put us on the map. And we're still here 50 years later.
Yeah.
Um, the Wall is one of the
Oh man,
greatest songs ever written.
amazing. Yes.
Um, but then the proggier, edgier side of me has to pick the magnum opus
Yeah, that is
because
beautiful.
it is. I recently saw a classical composer do a breakdown on it, and his take on it was very interesting because we're doing it from the gut, and he was approaching it from a musical scientific point of view. And here, all of a sudden there's this weird seventh in there, but look over there. That's why. Yeah, it was very interesting to watch that perspective of it.
Oh, it's
But
like, oh, so that's what
that
we
was
do.
the song was. It was when we put it together. The song was called Leftoverture because it was made of leftovers. It was just I've got the part. It was just a little warm up thing, and we're picking up scraps off the floor, things that never sussed into songs, and so we started patching this quilt together and that became the song Leftoverture because of Leftovers. The record goes, no, wait a minute. That's the greatest title of all time. That's going to be the album cover and the
Okay.
album name.
That is an awesome one.
And they chose Magnum Opus for it, which was fine with us.
I think that suits it well. And
It does.
and that's a great one, you know. I love to play that for a few unsuspecting prog heads that maybe haven't really dug into the Kansas catalog. And it's like, was this Gentle Giant? Is this? It's like, no, it's Kansas. You know,
Yeah, there's
you need to
a lot of
dig
a
into the
lot of this.
catalog because there's a lot of great progressive stuff in there. You know.
Well, we always wanted to have that element, but it's never all we were about.
No, no.
Like say Down the Road that's just a straightforward butt kicking rock and roll song.
You know, I got to ask you, that song in other people's hands would be Southern rock, but to my
Yeah,
ears, it's midwestern rock. There's a
I
difference.
agree.
What do you think the difference is? Just no twang, no Southern affectations, or
I
I
think
think musically,
the accent wise, it doesn't have that Southern twang to it.
yeah.
Um,
But that could
I
be like
think
an Allman Brothers tune, the way it's put together. You know, it's
it could be, but some like a latter Allman Brothers, which is more Dickie Betts influence, which was a lot more major key country influenced,
sure,
um, as was from Molly Hatchet to Leonard Skinner to so many of the bands had a little bit more of a southern rural flavor to them, which was deeply connected into the country music. We weren't.
yeah,
And so we approached it more from a Fleetwood Mac, Peter Green
sure,
type
right,
of
kind of
thing.
British
Of
influence.
um, I was never all that big into the blues until John Mayall was working with Eric Clapton, the Blues Breakers. Suddenly, the blues became very interesting. The Yardbirds, the Animals, the British twist on American blues, the Rolling Stones. I could hear that, and that really fascinated me. To hear Eric Clapton playing Les Paul to a little Marshall combo amp with John Mayall. Instead of, to me, before that, a guitar was we played a lot of soul music in the previous bands. It was a rhythmic, chunky, just part of the rhythm section. And blues was more of a B.B. King style of that very clean singing notes. Eric Clapton, all of a sudden, it was this throaty, more in the vein of a saxophone that was so much more expressive that took over for the voice. It wasn't just it had the girth and balls of just a really gruff blues singer. It had so much emotion in it. That was good. That changed my world forever. Was the British and Eric Clapton, especially at that time, their adaptation of American blues.
Oh, yeah, me too. You know, like a lot of those songs, "Born Under a Bad Sign" and all that. First time I ever heard it was when Cream played it. You know.
Yeah. I mean, Cream again, another. Uh, what a phenomenon that was, and legendary to this day. And it was for such a short time in
Yeah.
reality.
There's just something about taking the American blues and squeezing it through the British filter that really appealed to me. Still does.
It does me too.
You know, but it's all great stuff. Okay, point of no return. Wow, what's your favorite from that one?
Gratitude level, Dust in the Wind.
Sure.
That was us. Kerry brought that as we were working on a new album, and so songs were being submitted. Wayward Son for Leftoverture was the last song brought in on the last day of rehearsal, and Dust was similar in that we pretty much had an album written, had some stuff, extra stuff in the can, and Kerry goes, "Well, I've got this other song just to throw in the pile. It's an acoustic song. It's not really what we do, but I just thought I would add this." So he turns on his reel to reel, and he just did a one take rough of the acoustic part, and had a lyric sheet. He was kind of humming along the melody, and Steve was reading it. And they turned off the tape machine, and Dave Hope goes, "Where did that come from?" And Carrie's like, "Yeah, you guys like that?" And he said, "That's our next single, period." I mean, even in that elementary, rudimentary first time hearing, there was gold in them there hills. We knew it.
Yeah.
And Carrie's like, are you really? And so I can remember going to Sofia, Bulgaria, probably about 15 years ago. We'd never been there before. And we get there, and there's people in the streets, following our cars around, waving, paparazzi. And what took you so long to get here? It's like, we were never asked. We didn't know. Place, it was a performing arts center built by the Russians when they occupied really behind the Iron Curtain there. And beautiful hall. Everybody sang along with every song. They knew the entire catalog that we played. But acoustically, playing Dust in the Wind was the first time you could really hear them. And to be playing Dust in the Wind, and just as loud as could be, I could hear the Bulgarians singing so loudly I could hear their accent. Was one of the more surreal moments ever. And so my gratitude for that song just popping up one day. But my favorite song, I will always love playing it, never be tired of it. Just out of gratefulness for it. But my favorite song on the album, boy, that's a pretty tough one. I'm going through it.
They're all so good, it's hard to just pick one. I got to say, that first side is one of the best flowing sides in all of classic rock. The way Point and especially the way that Paradox boils down into Portrait and all that.
Portrait. Yeah, that was my first Strat was Portrait.
Is the Strat on Sparks of the? Is that on Sparks of the Tempest too?
And then on Sparks too, yeah.
Thought I heard a Strat in there. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's just I just added another tonal quality to the arsenal. And Jeff Glissman was really into Strats. And so I said, I'm going to play this, so we could have it, instead of two similar sounding guitars, one a little bit different. So using that for the verses and stuff.
Off the top of my head, I got to say Paradox. I just think that's such a thrill ride.
And it's always been a test of dexterity. And that song is really, that's where tone comes into play, because there's a certain snappiness to it. And if the room is a little bit mushy, or the amp you're using isn't quite working out, you start digging in too hard, and it starts getting sloppy and a lot of clams. It's not something you just jump out of the box and play.
No, I'd say that's one of your harder songs to play. Really,
a lot of memory work in that, a lot of dynamics. I've played it a lot. We're giving it a rest right now, which I'm glad. I played it nonstop for at least the last 10 years. Right. And sometimes songs just have to go away to make room for something else.
But I think my deep cut would probably be Hopelessly Human. I think that's such a wonderful epic that sometimes gets a little overlooked.
I think it is overlooked. When Robby Steinhardt first got back into the band, gosh, I don't know, 25 years ago now.
Yeah, I got to say, I saw you guys open for Emerson, Lake and Palmer at Lakewood. You remember that show?
Oh, yeah, sure.
And it was I didn't know Robby was back. I was expecting the Freaks lineup, and then the lights come up, and it's like, welcome to Kansas, and it's like, wait a minute. No internet back then, so we didn't know.
Should have been backstage to watch all the fighting with the LP.
I remember the power went out for like 30 minutes, and then they came back, and they seemed more pissed off than before the lights went out. Well,
Keith Emerson's rig to see it from the back, there must have been 500 cables connecting all this stuff together, and a roadie
Yeah.
back there just feverishly trying to keep everything running.
Oh man,
And
it always makes
I
me
think,
think of like Lily Tomlin on Laughing. It's like, oh, get me Poughkeepsie. You know.
and I think him and Carl Palmer kind of got into it. Then they left stage, and I had a knockdown drag out in the backstage area. Then eventually they decided they would finish the show, which they did. But um, yeah, it was very contentious. But
Was touring with Yes any more harmonious?
yeah, it was. We didn't really hang that much. Yeah, sometimes we were in the same hotel, sometimes we weren't. The only time I spent a little time with Chris Squire just because we were in an airport on occasion, and he'd be at the bar, so I'd go up and sit next to him, and have a couple of drinks with him.
Sure.
And a very nice guy.
Oh yeah.
But they were. It's not like they weren't nice and they weren't approachable. They were just a little too big for me.
I hear you. I hear you. They're
I think a
legends.
lot of that it was just me. It's like when I met Mick Jagger, he came into our dressing room. We played with him in Boulder at the stadium, 120,000 people or something. And he just walked into the dressing room with Keith Richards and says, "Hal, welcome to the show. Glad you love your band. Is there anything you need?" And I just stood there with my dick in my hand. I didn't even know what to do. I didn't say anything. I was so starstruck.
I would be too.
But those were more like childhood idols in my beginnings. Now here's Yes, which is, pick 5 favorite albums. I'm not sure if Close to the Edge is my favorite, but it's in the top 5.
Oh yeah, man.
I can remember the first moment I heard the first Yes song, and it was just the bass tone almost scared me. It was so aggressive. It's going, my God, what is this? This is incredible. And so to be on the road with him was, I knew my place, or at least what I thought my place was to be quiet and in the background, don't bother them, and to observe. It was funny, as my guitar tech from a few years previously was Steve Howe's tech.
Oh, is that the guy Shoes?
Shoes.
Yeah, he was from Atlanta, I think, if I remember right.
He was from Atlanta, and he was legendary.
So how about Monolith? What's your favorite on that one?
On the other side, I would say.
Yeah, that's
probably
just one of the greatest ballads in the catalog.
It's very accessible, but yet you can imagine it on the radio at that time, but it's still very Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
Great performance by Steve. It was a fun song. That's one of the hardest songs to play. The guitar fingering of that is so awkward.
That arpeggio under the verse, it's kind of weird.
It's very awkward. And it's one that I haven't played in a long time, so I try to do it. And over the years, my picking style has changed. Back then, I just flat picked, but now I pick with 3 fingers. And I can't go back. And so right. it's much harder for me to play that now than it was at the time. Left hand is hard, right hand is hard, and it moves along. Rags would play that with me too, and we both let's throw that back into the set. Me and David was just oh, no, because okay, it's 2 songs away. It's 1 song away. It's now okay. Here comes verse. Here it is. I mean, it was one of those little yips that you see that's coming down the road, and you're playing another song, but it's getting closer and closer. Here it is.
Oh, I've got
was one
those.
Of them.
I've got those.
We all do.
Where it's like I'm excited to play this. I'm kind of terrified at the same time.
Yeah, there's always there's a few humps in the night.
Yeah.
That it's always, I'm through that one.
Right, exactly. It's like I'm smooth sailing the rest of the night now.
Yeah, always. Yeah,
I know that feeling definitely. For me, I think I really love People of the South Wind. I think that's just great, and I think that's one of Carey's greatest solos. It's just
Yeah, it's an for such a it's an odd scale for a single attempt. Um, and with the beginning, da, 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 it's so peppy and happy.
yeah,
And when it hits that, it's not the notes that most people would choose. I don't think the way da 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 da. Da. It's it darkens it a little bit,
yeah, it does. Like the
and
verse.
there's a great tone.
Yeah, so that's my quick answer. I mean, the epics on there, of course, are amazing. Glimpse of Home is a wonderful, wonderful tune.
That
Yeah,
I will spill the beans on. That's one of the new songs,
yes,
and God, I love playing it.
yeah.
Um, maybe we're having some construction done. We had a roof put on over our deck, and we had these new Sonos speakers put out there, Sonos radio. Glimpse of Home came on. And it was like, we've got to do this. We've got to do this next tour. And I was sitting there, I mean, air guitar, dun, 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 dun. I mean, I was just, oh, I love this solo I did here. This is one of my favorite solos. And so, thought word deed. I called Phil and said, we're doing this song, this tour. He goes, yeah, I'd love to do that.
Well, I'm glad you did. And after doing Point, it was almost like, well, Monolith is next, but they aren't going to devote a whole set to that. But I hope they at least play a few things we haven't heard them do
Yeah.
in decades, and you
And,
did. So that's
and
very
that's a song
satisfying.
with a lot of twists and turns,
Oh yeah.
a lot of key changes, that whole ending.
Oh yeah.
There's there's not, I mean, there's guitar there you have to listen for. It's like Al Kiowa playing in the background. These little kind of clean melody lines and like triad chords and stuff, but it is constantly mutating. Um, and it's memory, muscle memory, and it's mental memory, and repetition, 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 to where it's one of the harder. It's not hard to play; it's hard to remember.
Right.
It's things. A lot of things just lay out logically on the neck, and you can just play. But that ending is very musical,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's a lot of buildups to this next passage is down a full step because of this chord structure leading to it. It's very complex,
Yeah. Well,
and I love playing that song.
I was watching a clip of Joe playing it about like the third night he was with you, and he's just nailing it. And it's just like, wow, that's a lot to remember, and he's got it all down beautifully. Um,
Yes.
so what about Audio-Visions? I got to say, my favorite has got to be No One Together. How do you guys feel about that song? It's like the one epic that just hasn't been dusted off since like the early 80s.
Well, that was supposed to be on Monolith, but it was too long,
Yeah,
and so we'd already recorded it. So we thought, well, we'll put it on the next album. Well, being very critical of, like, you're setting up drums, and it's a different drum set, and it's in a different corner of the room, or maybe a different room in general, different microphones. We can't get these to match. It's not going to match sonically with the rest of the album. So we had to strip the drums, and Phil had to play it to the tracks on the new setup, which was, that was not done to a click either, and it meanders along. So Phil had to. I mean, I don't know how many times he would get to that final stretch, and the wheels would fall off the wagon. Like, okay, again, it's we haven't revamped that song in a long time. That's another tough one.
oh, it is.
Uh,
We learned it for the Weedheads the year you guys were in
that
Topeka.
moves right along.
And man, I think I worked on that song for 6 months trying to memorize,
Yeah,
parse that out.
it would take me a long time to redo that too.
Oh man,
And I would
especially that
agree.
middle little da 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 ba da da ba da 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 ba da da ba da ba ba da da ba do that little arpeggio. Trying to play that up to tempo was a bitch.
Well, and my second guitar was a Fender Jaguar that had that little felt rubber pad that you push the thing and it would mute your strings.
Oh yeah.
And so I like to use that effect a lot, but I no longer have the guitar. So what I used to do, and I did on that part, is I would just take a paper towel and roll it up, and wedge it under there, but you can't get it too much, or it screws up the intonation. But it's got to be farther back.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I could just play it normally, and it would take care of the muting.
So, what would be your favorite on Audio-Visons?
I would have to agree with you on that. That was a very epic song. It was fun to play.
Oh yeah, man. I just think that's one of your most majestic tunes. I hope one day you guys will dust it off.
Well, I know I hear other guys in the band talking about it too. Ronnie wants to do it really bad.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so,
That might
next year,
it'd be good for the 51st anniversary.
there you go. All the ones we didn't play.
Exactly. Well, that's one of the things that always excites me is when you guys dust off something fresh. Old but fresh. You know what I mean? It's like if you just played the same set every year, it'd be kind of hard to get excited about it. So I'm glad you keep mixing it up.
It's essential for us too. And we're not foreigner. We can't start and end with hits. They've got 24 hits and they play 24 songs. The good news and the bad news of that is we don't have that many, which gives us an opportunity to play the have to songs, and then we're wide open for all the other stuff.
Yeah.
So we do have the opportunity to mix it up.
Yeah. So the next record, Vinyl Confessions, that one's kind of where things started to shift quite a bit. And musically, it's a little more streamlined, I guess. The 80s were coming. I think everybody was trying to write more concise stuff. What's your favorite from that one?
I'm trying to think of what is on it.
There's like Crossfire and Play On and Chasing Shadows. And
that was one. Actually, we did that with Ronnie when we first started doing some of the long shows with the acoustic beginning. We did Chasing Shadows for a while. That's a very nice song.
Yeah, that is.
That's just a really good song. Don't have a lot of favorites of that era.
The one I like is Diamonds and Pearls. So it's almost like Kansas goes Steely Dan.
Yeah, it is a bit Steely Dan. I played a banjo in the middle of it.
Like a soprano sax solo.
It was, I guess, more the times they were a changing, and I wasn't really happy about it. David and Carrie were both, one foot out the door. Steve had left, and different record company pressures because of the change in times, and now they're trying to shoehorn us into MTV and all this stuff, and I see those times as a bridge between then and now, and for that I'm grateful for them. I think John Elaponte is a tremendous talent. I think he's better off on his own than he was with us, and I think we're better off. Those were important times to survive through.
Sure, yeah.
But not my favorite times. Working with Ken Scott, I was very excited for that. And I'm not really sure what he brought to the table for that.
What about Neil Kernon on the next one?
That was I liked that album better. We recorded that in the fairgrounds.
Yeah, here in Atlanta, at Lakewood, right?
Yeah, we had a rehearsal hall there in one of the buildings, and we brought in a Lomobile, and so we had a full, everything all set up there. We did parts all over the place in that room. It was a lot of fun to record that record there.
Drastic Measure we're talking about.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like a Fight for Hour with Fire. We put Phil on this long cement I'm not even sure what it was. It wasn't. It was the cymbals were almost hitting the ceiling, and that's how we recorded the drums with gates on it, just to get these. Neil was very inventive in kind of old school techniques of capturing sounds, by placement of things, rather than relying on outward gear. And so we experimented a lot on that album with that. So that I enjoyed the process more than I did the outcome.
Yeah, I've got to say it's not my favorite batch of tunes. It's probably the
Yeah.
least Kansas-esque album in the catalog in a lot of ways.
Again, a lot of record company pressure again. Yeah, I mean, I would put that close to the bottom of the list.
Yeah.
I don't ever spin that record.
Yeah, I just it's okay, but it just seemed like you guys were running on fumes by that point in a lot of
We
ways.
were. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a big change was a coming.
Yeah, and a good one. Power.
Yeah,
That must have been a really happy time to kind of get Steve back and kind of steer the ship yourselves.
yeah, enter Billy Greer, and that was fun. Uh, yeah, we wanted someone that had some classical chops to work with us, to get bits and pieces of old Kansas in there. That's what Andrew Powell was working with Alan Parsons, so we had him produce, and it was a lot of fun work with him. Had some highlights. Without a violin, it was a different Kansas. It just was. Steve was a great guy. He'd just been intimidating since he just won the best guitar player on earth for like the fourth year in a
Steve
row.
Morse. Yeah, I
Yeah,
gave it to him so many times they disqualified him after a
yeah.
while.
They turned him into bronze, but he's not that kind of guy. He's just this nice, sweet,
Down to earth.
unpretentious, down to earth, talented.
Absolutely.
On so many levels of things, from a pilot to a dirt bike rider to a farmer to anything. And I learned a lot from Steve. And musicians are going to look at this hack. He's trying to play. We all point fingers. Steve wasn't that way. We walked into like a Holiday Inn after a gig somewhere. We stepped into the bar for a minute. This band was playing. They're pretty crappy, and also Steve goes, "Did you see what that guy just did?" Yeah, it was. I didn't notice him. He did something. It was with his toggle switch. To flip the toggle switch and then something with his right hand. He said, "I've never seen anybody do that before." Oh wow! Here's Steve is learning from a guy that's about a 4-year player maybe, and he's picking up tips.
Yeah.
And that's Steve Morse. He was always learning.
Yeah, definitely. And always kind of teaching us and inspiring us along the way as well. So, what's your favorite one on Power?
God, is the instrumental on that one?
Yeah, Musicato.
That would be my favorite, I
Yeah.
think. Well, but then I Can't Cry Anymore.
Oh, yeah, that wonderful producer's cover.
Maybe Steve Walsh's best vocal performance.
Oh, yeah.
No one else could have ever done that.
No, I really feel like that was kind of his peak right around 85 or so. So, yeah, that's a great one. Silhouettes in Disguise is a real
that was fun to play. That came up for this tour, and I refused. There's some things that only Steve Morse can do, and that was one of them. Dun, 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 and he's picking every note.
Right.
And it's so percussive. I just said, I am not going to go out there and embarrass myself by trying to do that. I'm just not. I will not play that song.
I hear you. We couldn't either. No way. In the Spirit, though, that was the album that had the kind of half originals, half outside writers. And none of those outside songs were particularly great. They were okay. Steve kind of made them shine. But I don't know. What do you think?
Well, the outside songs were, the album was done with Bob Ezrin. We loved it. And MCA said, "You're not done." And they made us record 2 new songs, which were the covers. We didn't want to do it, but they demanded. Meanwhile, Bob Ezrin had moved on. He had another project we backed up into. And so we did it. I mean, Bells of St. James was a song that was almost dropped. And I put Phil and Bob in a room and screamed until I got my way. I've never been so passionate. I said, "This is the best solo Steve Morse has ever played on a Kansas record. This is the most Kansas song of anything we've done in the last 2 records. This is going on the fucking record." And finally said, okay. And of course, naturally, that's my favorite song on the record.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you're right. It is the most Kansas one. I love that one. I also think One Big Sky is a really fun one.
I struggled with that one. It reminded me, there's just something about it that just reminded me a bit of kind of the British new wave pop era of, the like 4-piece boy girl bands that I just didn't like.
Yeah.
And it was too much of that for me. It not all of it, but the general hook of it all. I wasn't crazy about.
Yeah, I hear you. I could almost hear like Kate Bush singing it or something. This is very 80s. So Freaks of Nature. This one, for me, I felt like this was the first album since Audio-Visions that really sounded like a Kansas album. Would you agree with that?
Well, Jeff Glickman's producing again. We're back with violin.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was some good stuff on that record. In hindsight, I think a better album cover would have helped it.
I have to agree. Sometimes that makes such a difference,
It really does.
I mean, I get it. It goes with the title, but in hindsight, I don't know, something more arty.
Kansas, yeah, like what we were known for.
Yeah.
But yeah, that album definitely had some moments. But Hope Once Again I would love the middle section of that.
Beautiful.
That me and Dave kind of composed together. We did that in not the Bahamas, but Trinidad.
Trinidad, okay.
Went to Trinidad for that.
Interesting place to record a record.
Well, Jeff had found the studio down there, and it was very much going back. A lot of times you go back to find yourself. And like when we went to studio in the country, it was to get away from the big city, the distractions. We went to Bogalusa, Louisiana, where we found gold there. And so this was a modern day approach to that. Was this incredible studio there. We'll kind of live in a compound, and all we have done to do is work on the material and record. One of the most stellar studios I've ever seen. So it was an interesting project to do.
Yeah. So with Freaks, Cold Gray Morning may be the standout.
By nature, it was a Carrie song.
Yeah.
And so it's the most that is so Livgren-esque.
Very much, yeah.
That it just naturally fell in to the song choices.
Oh yeah. Peaceful and Warm, though, I think is another standout. I think that's one of Steve's best ballads in many years. And
it's a haunting thing.
It really is. You can almost kind of, being from Kansas, you can almost kind of visualize what he's singing about.
Exactly, yeah.
So, and the coda is just one of the great Kansas moments. I mean, that's goosebumps.
That was something from about a year before we'd been working on, and we actually were working with Jim Pedrick at the time, mentioning Survivor.
Yeah,
and nothing panned out of it. But we were trying to write a song around that particular end section.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so what we did was let's tag this. Let's see how it fits on that, and it did. And so that was it just worked out. And I still remember staying in the studio having my Marshall cranked and standing right in front of it. Did like 4 takes of it of just squealing harmonics. That just is kind of floating in and out of the background. Oh, da 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 da. Harmonics just kind of coming in and out. It was just monstrous in that room.
Yeah. That's another one of those floaty kind. There's like these parts where you're kind of floating. Hopelessly Human has another one where it's just this kind of
Well, what we were getting
vibe.
to Hopelessly Human. I can remember when Robby came back. That was one of the first songs we worked up because I wanted to play that again. I remember playing in Disney World. They had like this Friday concerts or something, and I remember playing vividly. Remember playing that. I think we opened with it. It's kind of a weird opening song, but I enjoyed that. When we did the tour, the whole album too. To play that again, that was always a high point to get back to play that. It's so many twists and turns, up downs, dynamics, powerful.
Yeah, very much, and some really killer keyboard solos on there too.
Yeah,
There's the one on the Moog, and then the next one's like on the organ, and it's just ass kicking. Great stuff. Um, so Somewhere to Elsewhere, the big reunion album came up around 2000. I know you basically Carrie had a batch of songs and let you guys just have your pick. And if I
yeah.
remember,
He just we're talking. He says, I've got a bunch of stuff just kind of in the can, and listen to it. And just loves this stuff. It's very Kansas. Why don't you guys come out to the farm and we'll listen to it. Maybe we can make a record here because we hadn't done anything in a while. And so Phil and I went out and we sifted through all the stuff and we assembled a record. And it'd be great to have Dave play on a few tracks. And Robby was involved and all of that. So and Brad Aaron came back to engineer from the Monolith days, and so I listened to the album recently. I didn't have a whole lot of memories of it because, like Icarus 2, we played a lot, and probably my favorite on the record, but not. I just hadn't heard it in a while, so I went back to listen. Like, wow, yeah, it was kind of like hearing it for the first time again. This is a pretty darn good record.
yeah, there's some really classic stuff, and I know some of that stuff had been left over since the early '70s, like some of that predated Kansas. This Kansas,
Yeah, well, there was the Coming Dawn, which is such a beautiful song.
Oh yeah.
And we're at the ending, and I said, Carrie, do you remember Thanatopsis, which was a song from Kansas 1? And that melody had been stuck in my head for years. And I said, what if on the vamp out, we bring in, bring that in. Dun, 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 dun. It was lyrics at the time, but let's bring that theme in to close it out. Because this is a new version of Kansas, and this is from the pre-Kansas stuff, and so we worked that into it.
I believe Rich's battery might have died. If so, I just want to take a minute to thank you for being part of the show, and we'll see if we can't catch up with him again in the future. So definitely take a minute to go see Kansas on tour. Great show. It's waiting for you.